I will briefly tell about the contents we will learn about. I will give you the guides such as basic concept, Biostar API, Biostar Cloud API and example, Biostar to API server, introduction of new Biostar to API, and then we will have a Q&A time together. First, there are two possible options in order to integrate the Suprema device with the third-party system. One is Biostar 2 SDK. It can be used when you want to have your own server programs for Suprema devices. Directly access to the device to control and retrieve information and have a single system, not multiple. Another one is to use Biostar 2 API. It can be used when you want to use the Biostar 2 while having certain UI for specific features. Use the Biostar 2 mobile application with your system and integrate Biostar 2 with your system. Basically, most functions of Biostar 2 API version 2 are similar with those of Biostar 2 API version 1. From now on, I will call Biostar 2 API version 1 as V1 API. Also, I will call Biostar 2 API version 2 as V2 API. Looking at the table regarding major differences between V1 API to V2 API, first of all, V1 API is comparative with the Biostar version 2.3 or lower versions, whereas V2 API is comparative with the Biostar version 2.4 or above version. Second, as of the Biostar version 2.4, custom levels can be created, unlike the previous version. As a result, V1 API supports only the predefined levels, whereas the custom levels are supported by V2 API. There is one of the reasons why V2 API was developed to reflect new features of Biostar 2 custom level. Last but not least, the API that can be called are quite different depending on the custom level in V2 API. In general, V1 API allows multiple login. On the other hand, V2 API allows only a session about the last login. To be specific, once you log in to Biostar 2 via API, this session will be maintained even if you call other APIs. Basically, Biostar 2 API is REST API, which means when you call Biostar 2 API, you have to use HTTP methods such as post, get, put, and delete. Let's look at four types of method. The post method is used to submit the entity to the specified resource. The get method requests the representation of the specified resource. Request using get method should only retrieve data. Next, the put method replaces all current representations of the target resource with the request payload. Finally, the delete method deletes the specified resource. When you call Biostar API from the cloud server using JavaScript, you will face an issue regarding cross-domain due to the same origin policy, which is one of security policies in JavaScript. The same origin policy restricts the document or a script loaded from the one origin to interact with the resource from other origin. The same origin means that a protocol, a host name, and a port are identical. Therefore, we strongly recommend that you use other languages if you utilize the Cloud API server. There are two types of Biostar API you can use. One is Biostar to Cloud API. I will tell you later, but in short, Cloud API is called from Cloud Server, which is located in Amazon Japan. Therefore, you don't need to install any application for API. However, in case of Biostar to local API, you should separately install the Biostar API server in local PC, where Biostar 2 server have been already installed. To sum up, local API is called without cloud. Have you ever heard about the Swagger UI? It's a tool which helps test and document REST API easily. We provide the information of Biostar API through the Swagger UI so that you can check kinds of APIs and those model schemas before calling API. I give you an example for the way to utilize this tool by using login API. The first step is that click the yellow box about the model schema in the parameters section. Then, JSON structures in this box will be copied and pasted into white box automatically. Following this, you have to enter the values to log into Biostar 2 in the white box. Once you click the Try Now button, you can retrieve a response message about the result of API call. In this page, I will introduce the Postman, which is Chrome application. I recommend you to use it. Postman is more efficient tool when you utilize API. By using it, you can construct complex HTTP methods quickly, organize them in collections, and share them with your coworkers. I think the biggest advantage is that the history you can call API is remained. You can download the Postman through the Chrome Web Store. Let's learn about how to use the Postman with Swagger UI. This way is very similar to use when using only Swagger UI. After clicking the yellow box of model schema in the parameter sector, you should copy all data shown in the white box. After that, you should paste them in the Postman instead of clicking Try It Out button. The data copied in Swagger UI have to be pasted in the yellow middle box in this page. This screen is about the Postman. In Postman, after you select the message type, for example, post, get, put, and delete in the drop box, you have to enter URL to call API. In this case, you should select the post message and then put the URL for login API. After that, you can paste the JSON structure copied from Swagger UI, and then you have to modify the values properly. At this point, you have to select the body, click the low radio button, and then select the JSON. Please check the green boxes. The final stage is to click the Send button. Then, the result of response message will be displayed in the bottom of the part. Now, we will learn about the way to call API with get method. In this example, I'll call users API to get the information on users. Before you send the get message, you have to check which parameters are required necessarily in the Swagger UI. Looking at the Swagger UI regarding users API, the parameters both limit and offset are mandatory. So you have to send a message into the URL including these parameters. If not, you will get the error message. Please look at the yellow box. In case that you have to use the parameters in the URL, you should use the following format. Please note that there should be no space in the URL. Now, I will play the video about how to use Postman with Swagger UI. Let's see it. Now, let's learn about the Biostar to Cloud API. This diagram is about Biostar to Cloud API. In this case, the important point is that you access the Biostar server by calling Biostar to API via cloud server. Especially, the envelope is the secure tunnels that allows the external request to access the local site. Although many of you already know the cloud setting in Biostar 2, I will explain this for the beginners one more time. To utilize Biostar 2 API, you have to first set the Biostar cloud configuration. In Biostar 2, once you set the password level to either medium or strong, you can set the cloud use into the value use. Then, you have to create the subdomain name to access your Biostar 2 via cloud. In addition, you basically enter email address, which is used to activate your Biostar 2 server via Biostar 2 cloud. Finally, server name, port used by cloud, and versions are set to default values, but you can change that according to circumstance. When you need to reinstall Biostar 2, I recommend that you should back up a file named setting.config because this setting will be initialized so that the situation you cannot use existing subdomain will happen. To prevent this issue, please follow the 3 steps shown in this page. Let's see the example of Biostar to Cloud API. From now on, we'll learn about major API. Firstly, it is login API. In general, whenever you call other API, you have to log in first. The table is about the parameters that you can use in login API with post message. All parameters are not required at all times, but the parameters which is mandatory is marked as upper letter M. In login API, you have to minimally send a message including name, password, and user ID. I'd like to tell you about the parameter name. In this API, it means subdomain name. Don't forget it. This reception code is to call login API with post message. Please look at it carefully. I will tell about several main points. First of all, the global variable session ID is very important to maintain a session you log in. As I mentioned earlier, whenever you call other API, you have to first call login API. However, if we use this variable, you don't need to call login API every time. Looking at the last yellow box, this part is about the process to get session ID when you succeed in calling login API. Second, please check the request URL carefully. Third, in Biostar API, you have to use JSON structure in order to send a message. In this example, I send the data by using dictionary data type in C#. In case of login API, the parameters consist of simple JSON structure. But in case of users API, you'll be able to use complex JSON structure. Let's check it later. Last but not least, please utilize the HTTP method properly. If you send a post message, you have to use post async method. If you send a get message, you should use get async method. Many of you make a mistake for this point. Second, I'd like to tell you about the session access group API. As I mentioned earlier, when using get message, you have to check whether some parameters are mandatory with URL. In this case, limit and offset parameters are necessary. The parameter limit means the number of results you want to call. The parameter offset means the start point to search dataset. If you see the source code for calling access groups, by checking the variable session ID, this program determines if you are the person who are successful login. If you are successful login, the session ID is not null. The next point is that you have to call getAsync method and include the necessary parameters in URL. Prior to learn about users API, we will look at various types of JSON structures. In this page, I will introduce 4 types of JSON structures you will mainly use. Type 1 is about the base level of JSON, which consists of a pair of key and value. We already use these structures in Login API. Next, type 2 is about the multiple values for a key. The multiple values are displayed as an array format. In case of type 3, it is about the multiple level of JSON. Looking at the structure, a value is comprised with several pairs of key and values for one key. In this case, the value is displayed as object data type in C#. Finally, type 4 is also about the multiple level, but it is a bit different from type 3. In type 3, the value can have one object, whereas the value in type 4 can have multi-objects. Let's see the source code regarding users API. You can see the multi-level of JSON. For example, access groups permissions, and user group. Most parameters displayed in this page are mandatory. One important thing is that on behalf of the parameter named role in V1 API, you have to use the parameter permission in V2 API. This parameter is used for expressing new function custom level in Biostar 2.4 or above. When it comes to the key permission, one of the values ID is mandatory. Please note that even if you set ID to 0, you will get the success message, but new users is not actually added in Biostar. Please keep in mind. In addition, you can confirm the information on permission by calling permission list API. As I mentioned earlier, the multi-level of JSON is used in users API. In this page, please look at the uses of dictionary type. Some of you would make a mistake like the wrong example when calling users API. Looking at the right side of example, the dictionary structure is far more complicated than the one for wrong example. After finishing this session, please review the correct sample code. The last example is about the event log API. You can select one of three. However, I recommend you should use the third one. To be honest, there may be log data in bulk in some cases. If there is a bulk of log data, it will take very long time to search logs, which can cause some problems. Please note that you should reload the search range on event logs by giving some conditions. One of example is that you can search the event log you want quickly by setting certain duration using start date time and end date time. Therefore, third option is the best to search event logs promptly. This is the source code for searching event log by device. This source code is similar to code access group API, so I will skip this explanation. I mentioned that there are two ways to call API previously. One is Cloud API. Another one is Biostar API server, which is called as local API. In case of local API, you don't use the cloud server when calling API. You must install the API server separately on the local site instead on the cloud server. In this case, Angular is not needed due to access Biostar server via local API server. I will say one more time. You must install the Biostar API server application to utilize local API. Please install it on a page where Biostar is already installed. This picture is about one of the installation procedure based on Biostar 2 version 2.4.0. Many of you make a mistake for forgetting the API server name. Please note that you should remember the API server name because it will be used on behalf of subdomain name in Cloud API. However, this process will be changed a bit in the next version. Please check the remaining elements later. I recommend you to try to use Postman. When using local API with Biostar version 2.4 or above, the port number is 8795. On the other hand, if you use local API with Biostar version 2.3 or below, the port number is 8790. Please keep in mind. Now, I will introduce Biostar API version 2.4.1, which will be released soon. There are three major features. Add the registration procedure for system account, available to log in with admin account, and add new API related to Face. We will learn about these features in the next phase quickly. First, the registration procedure for system account is added when you verify email in order to activate your Biostar server via Biostar Cloud. Once you click the link in your email, you will move to other page to register system account like the screenshot. Please note that if Biostar server is stopped for about 1 hour, the registration for system account you entered will be cancelled. As a result, you will receive the email regarding re-registration. This procedure will take around 5 to 10 minutes. Second, you can call the login API with an admin account which is provided as root account. Actually, before Biostar API version 2.4.0, you have to create new administrator in Biostar in order to call login API successfully. However, from Biostar API version 2.4.1, you can use the admin account for calling login API via Biostar API. Last but not least, new APIs regarding Face are added. Please check them in Swagger UI after finishing this session.